Have you ever stopped to think why? In an era where we have instant access to all accumulated human information, where algorithms can predict our desires before we even feel them, and where artificial intelligence solves problems that have challenged our species for millennia, we feel lonelier, more misunderstood and disconnected than ever before. This is not just a cruel irony of progress. It is the symptom of a profound crisis that is approaching like a silent storm, and by 2026 will reach proportions that will fundamentally transform how we live, love, and exist in the world. The intelligence we are losing doesn't appear in any IQ test. It is not measured by algorithms, nor quantified in data. It is the intelligence that allows us to look into another person's eyes and understand not just what they are saying, but what they are feeling behind the words. It is the ability to navigate the complex labyrinth of human emotions, to create genuine connections in a world that increasingly values superficial and performative interactions. It is the ancestral wisdom of how to be truly human in the company of other humans, a skill that our species took hundreds of thousands of years to develop, and that we are losing in a single generation. Imagine a 20-year-old young woman sitting in a coffee shop, surrounded by dozens of people, but completely absorbed by the luminous screen of her phone. She has 2,000 friends on social media, receives hundreds of likes on her photos, maintains simultaneous conversations with 15 different people through messaging apps. By digital standards, she is extremely connected and socially successful. But when she looks up and sees an older man at the next table, clearly distressed, perhaps struggling with some deep pain reflected in every line of his face, she cannot decode these emotional cues. She doesn't know how to offer a simple gesture of humanity, a smile of understanding, a kind word. His body language is a code she never learned to read, because she grew up in a world where emotions are expressed through emojis, and human connections are mediated by algorithms that filter and simplify the infinite complexity of human emotional experience. This young woman is not an isolated case. She represents an entire generation that is growing up with a radically different form of social intelligence, one that privileges digital curation of personality over emotional authenticity, speed of response over depth of reflection, amplification of one's own ego over genuine understanding of the other, and the consequences of this transformation go far beyond what we can imagine. To understand the magnitude of what we are losing, we need to go back to the origins of human emotional intelligence. For most of our history as a species, our survival depended completely on our ability to read, interpret, and respond appropriately to the emotional states of other members of our group. A hunter who could not perceive when his companion was afraid, injured, or in danger, not only put the mission at risk, but threatened the survival of the entire tribe. A mother who could not interpret the subtle signs of discomfort, hunger, or illness in her baby saw her genetic lineage come to an end. A person who could not navigate the political and emotional complexities of the social group soon found themselves isolated, exiled, or dead. For this reason, over millions of years of evolution, we developed extraordinarily sophisticated neural systems to process emotional information. Our brains became incredibly efficient machines for detecting facial microexpressions that last only fractions of a second, for interpreting almost imperceptible tonal variations in voice, for sensing the subtle energetic changes that accompany different emotional states. We learn to synchronize our heart rhythms and breathing with those around us, creating a form of communication that transcends words and allows us to literally feel what the other is feeling. This capacity for empathy and emotional connection was not just a social luxury. It was the fundamental technology that allowed us to form cohesive groups, create complex cultures, develop language, art, music, and all the other achievements that define human civilization. When two humans connect emotionally in a genuine way, something magical happens at the neurological level. Their brains begin to synchronize, creating coordinated patterns of neural activity that enable a form of collective cognition that is much more powerful than any individual mind could achieve alone. But now, for the first time in human history, we are creating a social environment that not only does not reward these emotional skills, but actively inhibits them and replaces them with artificial forms of connection that simulate intimacy without ever truly achieving it. The digital platforms that dominate our social lives were designed by engineers with a very limited understanding of human psychology and optimized for metrics that have little to do with genuine emotional well-being. They maximize screen time, number of clicks, frequency of interaction, but do not measure the quality of human connection, the depth of mutual understanding, or the degree of emotional intimacy being created. The result is a system that addicts people to forms of social validation that are simultaneously intense and empty. When you receive 100 likes on a photo, your brain releases a small but significant dose of dopamine, creating the momentary sensation of connection and social approval. But this sensation is fundamentally different from the dopamine that is released when you have a genuine and deep conversation with someone who really understands who you are. The first is quick, artificial, and quickly dissipates, leaving you hungry for more. The second is slower to build, but creates a lasting sense of satisfaction and belonging that nourishes the human soul in ways that digital interactions simply cannot replicate. The problem becomes even more complex when we consider how these changes are affecting children's brain development. The human brain continues developing until 25 years of age, and the experiences a person has during this critical period literally sculpt the neural architecture that will determine how they process emotions and relate to others for the rest of their lives. A child who grows up primarily interacting with screens and algorithms is developing fundamentally different neural patterns from a child who grows up in environments rich in direct human emotional interaction. Recent neuroscience studies show that children who spend more than 3 hours a day on digital devices present measurable differences in gray matter density in brain regions responsible for emotional processing, empathy, and impulse regulation. Their amygdalae, the brain structures that process fear and other intense emotions, show different activation patterns. making them more prone to anxiety, depression, and emotional regulation difficulties. At the same time, regions of the prefrontal cortex that are responsible for empathy and understanding others' intentions and emotions show less connectivity and reduced activation. This means that an entire generation is growing up with brains that are literally less capable of forming deep emotional connections. It's not that they don't want to connect with others. It's that they don't have the neural circuits necessary to do so effectively. It's like trying to play symphonic music with instruments that can only produce a few basic notes. The music is still possible, but the rich harmonic complexity that defines a great composition is lost forever, and the consequences have already begun to manifest in alarming ways. Rates of depression and anxiety among young adults have tripled in the last 15 years. The number of people who report having no close friends has doubled in the last decade. Marriages are lasting shorter, and when they end, it's often because partners report feeling misunderstood, unseen, or emotionally neglected by each other. We are seeing the emergence of an epidemic of loneliness that is affecting people of all ages, but is particularly severe among those who grew up in the digital age. Doctors have begun documenting something they are calling chronic emotional hunger, a condition where people feel constantly unsatisfied in their relationships, always searching for something deeper, more real, more emotionally nourishing, but unable to identify what exactly is missing or how to find it. It's like having chronic thirst, but only having access to drinks that don't really hydrate. You keep drinking, but the thirst never really goes away. I want to pause for a moment to ask you directly, do you recognize this feeling in your own life? This subtle but persistent hunger for real connection, for being truly seen and understood by another human being? Those moments when you are surrounded by people, perhaps even at a party or social gathering, but feel deeply alone because you perceive that all conversations happen on a superficial surface, touching only the safest and most performative aspects of each person's personality. I know many of us carry this feeling in silence, sometimes not even being able to name exactly what is missing. But if this feeling resonates with you, share your experience in the comments. It can be as simple as writing, "I feel this emotional hunger when." Your honesty may be exactly what another person needs to read today to realize they are not alone in this search for genuine connection. What makes this situation even more tragic is that the technology causing the problem could also, in theory, be part of the solution. We have more powerful communication tools than any previous generation in human history. We can instantly connect with any person anywhere on the planet. We can share thoughts, ideas, art, and music with an ease that our ancestors would consider literally magical. But we are using these incredible tools in ways that diminish rather than amplify our capacity for deep emotional connection. The reason for this lies in the incentive structures that govern the digital economy. Technology companies make money by maintaining our attention, and they have discovered that the most effective emotions for capturing and maintaining attention are anger, fear, envy, and outrage. Emotions like compassion, empathy, gratitude, and serenity, which are fundamental for emotional well-being and healthy social connections, are simply not as effective at generating clicks and screen time. This has created a digital environment that is constantly pushing us toward our worst emotional instincts. Recommendation algorithms amplify content that makes us angry or anxious because this type of content generates more engagement. Social networks encourage us to curate idealized versions of our lives that have little to do with our real emotional experience. Dating apps reduce the infinite complexity of human attraction and compatibility to a few photos and catchy phrases, creating a culture of romantic disposability that makes it increasingly difficult to form lasting emotional bonds. But perhaps even more concerning is how these changes are affecting our relationship with ourselves. Emotional intelligence is not just about understanding others, it is also about developing a healthy and conscious relationship with our own emotional states. It means knowing how to recognize when we are stressed, sad, angry, or anxious. It means having the skills to regulate these emotions in constructive ways instead of simply trying to escape them through digital distractions. But we now live in a culture that treats any emotional discomfort as a problem to be immediately solved rather than valuable information to be understood. When we feel lonely, instead of exploring what this loneliness might be trying to communicate about our deeper emotional needs, we immediately pick up the phone and get lost in infinite feeds of distraction. When we feel anxiety, instead of practicing breathing techniques or mindfulness that help us process this anxiety in healthy ways, we take medication or isolate ourselves in virtual worlds where we can temporarily forget our real problems. The result is a population that is becoming increasingly emotionally illiterate. People who can navigate incredibly complex digital systems, but don't know how to have a difficult conversation with a romantic partner. Individuals who can optimize marketing campaigns using sophisticated data analysis, but cannot identify when they are professionally burned out or what they need to do to restore their emotional balance. Highly educated professionals who can solve complex technical problems but feel completely lost when it comes to creating emotional intimacy in their personal relationships. And here we arrive at the core of Harari's warning about 2026. It's not that an emotional apocalypse will suddenly happen on that specific date. It's that 2026 represents the tipping point where an entire generation of people who grew up primarily in the digital age will reach full adulthood and begin forming families, careers, and the social structures that will determine the direction of our civilization for the next 50 years. Imagine a society where the majority of people struggle to form deep and lasting emotional bonds, where marriages dissolve not because of dramatic conflicts, but because of a gradual erosion of emotional intimacy, where parents love their children deeply, but don't know how to connect with them emotionally in ways that nourish them and help them develop into emotionally healthy human beings, where work colleagues collaborate efficiently on technical projects, but are unable to create the kinds of trust and mutual understanding that make work deeply satisfying and meaningful. This is not dystopian science fiction. It is the path we are clearly walking now, and the costs are already becoming visible across multiple dimensions of human life. In physical health, chronic loneliness and emotional isolation are being linked to an impressive array of medical problems, from cardiovascular disease to compromised immune systems. Studies show that loneliness has an impact on mortality equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. People who feel chronically disconnected have significantly higher rates of depression, anxiety, early dementia, and even cancer. In the sphere of relationships, we are seeing concerning patterns of instability and dissatisfaction. Divorce rates remain high, but even more significant is the growing number of people who simply avoid serious relationships, entirely because they don't trust their ability to sustain them emotionally. Dating apps have created a culture where the next option is always just a swipe away, making it increasingly difficult to invest in the patience and emotional work necessary to build real intimacy over time. And perhaps most alarming, we are seeing these trends amplify in the next generation. Young children who have had access to tablets and smartphones from early infancy are showing significant delays in developing basic social skills. They struggle to make eye contact, have difficulty interpreting facial expressions, and often prefer interacting with digital characters instead of real people. Teachers report that it is increasingly difficult to maintain children's attention on activities that require patience, concentration, and collaborative social interaction. Pediatricians are documenting a dramatic increase in mental health problems among children, including anxiety, depression, sleep disorders, and emotional regulation difficulties. Even more concerning, many of these children seem to have lost the natural ability to play creatively and imaginatively. When left alone, without digital devices, they often become restless, bored, and unable to entertain or calm themselves without constant external stimulation. But before we despair completely with this dark diagnosis, it is important to remember that recognizing a problem is always the first step to solving it. And while the challenges are real and urgent, we also have unprecedented understanding of how the human mind works, how emotions operate, and how healthy social connections can be cultivated and maintained even in a digital world. Neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to form new neural connections and modify existing patterns throughout life, means that even adults who grew up with emotional intelligence deficits can learn and develop these skills. The human brain maintains its capacity for change and growth until very late in life, which means it is never too late to begin cultivating deeper and more satisfying forms of emotional connection. Some of the most effective interventions are surprisingly simple, but require conscious intention and consistent practice. Contemplative practices like mindfulness meditation teach people to develop a more conscious and balanced relationship with their own emotional states. Instead of automatically reacting to stress, anxiety, or sadness, they learn to observe these emotions with curiosity and compassion, creating space for wiser and more constructive responses. Non-violent communication exercises help people express their needs and feelings in ways that create connection instead of conflict. Simple techniques like reflecting back what we hear before responding, asking open questions that invite vulnerability, and sharing our own feelings authentically can transform superficial relationships into deeply satisfying connections. Gratitude practices, when done consistently, literally reconfigure the brain to perceive and focus on the positive aspects of human experience. People who spend a few minutes daily consciously appreciating the connections and positive experiences in their lives develop greater emotional resilience and feel more connected to others. Even more important, we need to begin creating spaces and cultures that actively cultivate and reward emotional intelligence. This means designing digital environments that prioritize quality of connection over quantity of engagement. It means creating physical spaces where people can meet face to face without the constant distraction of devices. It means teaching emotional skills in schools with the same rigor that we teach mathematics and science. Some visionary companies are already beginning to recognize that employees with high emotional intelligence are more creative, more collaborative, more resilient to stress, and more capable of leading effective teams. They are investing in training programs that teach skills like empathetic listening, conscious communication, and constructive conflict resolution. In the sphere of education, progressive schools are integrating social emotional learning into the core curriculum, teaching children to identify and express their emotions in healthy ways, to develop empathy for others, and to form positive relationships. These skills are not educational luxuries. They are fundamental competencies that will determine these children's ability to thrive in any area of life. But perhaps the most important change needs to happen at the individual level. Each of us needs to make the conscious decision to prioritize the development of our own emotional intelligence and to create relationships based on emotional authenticity instead of digital convenience. This means being willing to have difficult conversations, to share real vulnerabilities, to dedicate time and attention to truly knowing the people in our lives. It means establishing healthy boundaries with technology, creating sacred spaces in our lives where we can exist without the constant distraction of notifications and digital feeds. It can be as simple as having meals without phones, walks without podcasts, or conversations without checking messages every 5 minutes. It means practicing the lost art of simply being present with another human being, of listening not just to respond, but to truly understand, of asking questions that go beyond the superficial and invite genuine revelation of who the person really is behind the social masks we all wear. And perhaps most crucially, it means developing a more compassionate and conscious relationship with ourselves, learning to perceive our own emotional patterns without judgment, understanding which situations make us stressed or anxious, and developing healthy strategies to deal with these emotions. Recognizing our deep emotional needs and finding authentic ways to satisfy them. The truth is that emotional intelligence has always been one of the most valuable skills a human being can possess, but we now live at a historical moment where it has become even more critical. In a world where artificial intelligence can perform many of the cognitive tasks that were once exclusively human, our capacity for genuine emotional connection becomes our most distinctive competitive advantage. Machines can process data, recognize patterns, and even simulate conversations, but they cannot offer the kind of empathetic understanding, emotional support, and authentic intimacy that human beings need to thrive. As more aspects of our lives become automated and digitized, our hunger for real human connection will only grow. This means that people who develop high emotional intelligence will not only have richer and more satisfying personal lives, but also significant professional advantages. They will be the leaders who inspire genuine loyalty, the therapists, teachers, and counselors who really make a difference in people's lives, the romantic partners who create relationships that last decades, the parents who raise emotionally healthy and resilient children. But beyond personal benefits, there is a civilizational dimension to this issue that we cannot ignore. Democracy only works when citizens are able to understand and empathize with perspectives different from their own. Global cooperation on issues like climate change and economic inequality requires the ability to transcend narrow interests and think about the collective welfare of humanity. If an entire generation grows up with emotional intelligence deficits, unable to form deep connections with people different from themselves, the implications for social and political stability are profound. We are already seeing signs of this in the extreme polarization that characterizes public discourse in many developed democracies. People are increasingly unable to have constructive conversations with those who have different political opinions, and increasingly prone to demonize and dehumanize those they see as adversaries. The ability to maintain healthy emotional relationships across differences of opinion, to find shared humanity even amid conflict, to build bridges of understanding instead of walls of division, these are skills that our democracy and our civilization simply cannot survive without. This is why, when Harari warns about the costs of lack of emotional intelligence in 2026, he is not just talking about individual relationships or personal mental health, although these are crucial issues. He is warning about a fundamental threat to our ability to function as a cohesive and cooperative society. He is pointing to a crisis that may determine whether the next generation will build a more connected and compassionate world, or fragment into isolated tribes, each unable to understand or genuinely care about the others. The good news is that we still have time to change course. Emotional intelligence is not a mysterious gift that some people are born with and others are not. It is a set of skills that can be learned, practiced, and developed by anyone willing to invest the necessary time and attention. And unlike many other skills, emotional intelligence becomes more valuable when it is shared. When one person in a relationship, family, or community develops greater capacity for emotional connection, it elevates the quality of all relationships in that system. If these reflections touched something you have been feeling, but perhaps have not found words to express, know that you are not alone. By subscribing to the channel, you will connect with a growing community of people who share your concerns and your desire for a deeper understanding of the challenges we face as human beings in an era of accelerated technological transformation. Each week, we meet here to explore together the great questions that define our time and to seek not just understanding, but also practical paths to live with more wisdom, connection, and purpose in a world that often leaves us disoriented. This is not just a channel, but a space for dialogue and collective growth for people who refuse to accept superficiality as the inevitable destiny of human experience. The future of our emotional intelligence, and with it, the future of our relationships, our health, and our inner peace, is not something that simply happens to us. It is something we create through the choices we make each day, each interaction, each moment we decide to be truly present with another human being. In 2026, we will look back and see this moment as the turning point when a generation decided to reclaim the art of being deeply human in the company of other humans, or as the moment when we lost something precious forever. The choice, as always, is ours.
and civilizations. And this kind of books get so many readers, and so many readers love this kind of narrative that come from history, but point out towards the future. So I think this is a very interesting thing, and I want to discuss with Professor Harari about this phenomena. and what is the exactly significance of the things that have happened around his books, and also about his books Nexus, which largely lead to a very strong sense of a philosophical reflection of the whole thing. We named as civilizations. You give a very cold description of the things. But let us just start with very simple questions. Just as I mentioned, in nowadays, the professional academic work is somehow becoming increasingly self-enclosed. And we actually keep indifferent about the public issues and the common challenges that are shared by humankind. We just do our things in ancient texts, and we just publish our academic papers to get our salary, and your book just remind us as professional scholars to get back to the public sphere to address the challenges and the problems that shared by the human beings. And this is largely very interesting things as a historian. You got so many readers, and you give a so strong structure interpretation of human civilization. This is a very powerful tool to shape the mindset of your reader. And this means that you burdened a very strong ethic responsibility. You shape the mindset of your reader. And if we do believe that you have this power, how we can use this power responsibly? And what is your expectation from all your books, your readers can get from your books? Is a very special attitude? Is a kind of a concern? Or is an expectation of a future? Or something like that? I want to hear about your points about this.
What I try to do in all my works is help people understand themselves, help people understand reality better. And it's a very delicate job because people usually rush to judge reality and to judge history, to judge the past and the present. We want to know who are the good guys and who are the bad guys, whether things are good or bad. And when we rush to judge things, we don't have time to understand them. So in my writing, I try to write history without villains, without good guys and bad guys, but to understand the deep process of change. And I sometimes think about history maybe as a kind of collective therapy for humanity. I go to therapy every week. I have a weekly session. And people can wonder, why do people need to go to therapy? I mean, the subject matter in therapy is myself. Who knows myself better than me? Why do I need to go to some stranger to learn about myself? I mean, this is ridiculous. But it's not. Because yes, I know more about myself than any other person perhaps, but there are so many things I don't want to know about myself. That yet I have access to all the data, to the memories, to the daily events, but I reject. I mean, some things I really like to know about myself, but the more painful, the darker episodes in my life, the more painful things I do in the present, it's very difficult for a person to acknowledge that about oneself. Like if you're in a relationship and there is a problem in a relationship, so you ask, and people would say, I'm perfect. It's the other person who is causing all the problem. If only the other person changed a little, behaved differently, everything would be perfect. And you ask the other person, they would say exactly the same thing. I'm perfect. It's my husband, it's my wife that is causing all the problem in our household. So this is why you need to go to therapy. So to get professional help, to realize some very deep truths about yourself that are too difficult or too painful to acknowledge. And history is like therapy for entire civilizations or for the whole of humankind. Also, entire nations often don't want to acknowledge dark episodes in their past or dark things they are doing right now. Entire civilizations, the same. You ask, and almost every nation, almost every country would say, we are perfect. All the problems are because of the other nations. All the problems are because of the other civilizations, of the other cultures. And I think the responsible job of historians is to, and not to share blame, but to simply help people understand better the big processes and the deep sources of the problems in the world. And this is a big responsibility.
This is very interesting. I just cannot agree more about your points because, you just point out the core value of the humanity. The core value of humanity is not provide any accurate knowledge, not to make the word transparency. Actually, the most important thing is that this. Through the humanity and the reflections, we teach people do not make any judgment in rush, to try to lead a very hesitated life, especially intellectually, because the complexity of human nature, because different kind of narrative that were dominated our man side, that is biased and one-sided. This is largely because what? Because the limitation of our perspective of understanding. And this largely lead to my own understanding of your book. I think that through all your four books, you are largely trying to give a very cautious, refined warning to us as human beings, to urge us to respect, but never blindly trust our imperfect human nature. If we turn to the so-called development of technology and the dramatic change that's ongoing because of the AI technology, we'll find that the things is not just the technology itself. Just as Hinton has pointed out, the most important thing is the misuse of this technology, but not the technology itself. This largely leads us to a very important issues in the philosophy of politics, which we called technocracy. And those who dedicate the development of AI technology actually had been set up a systematic techno-tyranny on human beings. Just as me, I have no idea what the AI expert talking about. And I have no idea what I should do to facing up all this change. The only thing is that I was forced to accept it. And this is unfair. Why should I accept it? And the things is this. Those people who manipulate these skills and technologies are ordinary people. They might be evil. They might be trying to set up a dictation on us. And why we should accept it without any condition. We have no right to say no. This is the things that I think that your books try to urge us to reflect the deficiency of human beings. But this deficiency of human beings is the very point that differentiate us from the machine, because we have emotion, we have desire, and all those things largely lead to a very special and very correct attitude towards future I called it moderately optimistic. You should not too optimistic, but in no way you put it in pessimistic. This is largely the things that in my mind to say your book just as a warning towards us.
I often get this question of whether I'm pessimistic or optimistic about the future. I think it's the most common question that people ask me in interviewing, in private conversations. And I always say that I'm neither. I mean, pessimists are people who kind of think that no matter what you do, things will go badly. And this undermines human responsibility, because if no matter what we do, things will go badly, what's the point of even trying? Pessimism breeds despair. But optimism can be just as dangerous because it breeds complacency. Optimists tend to say, no matter what happens, things will turn out okay in the end. And then if this is the case, again, we don't need to take responsibility, because whether we act or don't act, whether we think very deeply about what we do or we just do the first thing that comes up in our mind, things will turn out okay. And I try to find a middle path of being responsible, which is not optimist or pessimist. It's realizing there are different futures possible ahead of us. We can draw a map of different futures, some good, some bad. Nothing is determined. There is no God and there is no law of history that will correct our mistakes if we take the wrong choices. We are not doomed. We have immense power, human beings. We have immense resources, knowledge. We can do the right thing, but there is no guarantee. Enough people need to make good decisions in order to reach the right destination. And, when I look at the world right now, I am appalled by the lack of responsibility, which is shown by many of the political and business leaders around the world. And it seems that humanity is going in a very, very dangerous direction. And at this moment, responsibility is more important than ever because of the AI revolution. We are in the process of creating not just the most powerful technology in history. We are in the process of creating potentially a new species of super intelligent entities, agents, that might very soon take control away from us. We have just a few years to get this thing right. I keep telling people that AI is not like the previous technologies we have invented in history. This time, it's not just about us. Philosophers have this habit that when people invent something, so they always say, it's not about the technology. It's about the humans. They decide what to do with the technology. This was always true, but it's no longer true. We are now creating an independent agent. The defining characteristic of AI is not automation, the ability to act automatically. The defining characteristic is agency. To be an AI, a machine must have the capacity to learn and change by itself, to make decisions by itself, and to invent new ideas by itself. If it can't do that, if it only follows your instructions, if you can predict everything it will do, it is not an AI. And we are rushing to create these super intelligent agents in a very irresponsible way. And as I travel the world and I talk with the leaders of the AI revolution, I ask them two questions again and again, the same way they ask me, are you optimist or pessimist? So I reply with two questions of my own. I ask them first, why are you moving so fast? Why don't give humankind a bit more time to adapt, to reflect, to do things more carefully and safely? And almost all of them reply the same answer. Almost all of them say, we know there are huge risks. They often know it better than anybody else, the leaders of the AI revolution. We know there are big risks. We would like to move more slowly, but we can't trust our human competitors. If we move more slowly and the other company or the other country doesn't slow down, they will win the AI race, and then they will dominate the world, and the world will be ruled by the most ruthless people. We cannot allow this, so we must move faster. And you then talk with the competitors, they say exactly the same thing. So everybody says we can't trust the other humans. Then I ask them the second question. Do you think you will be able to trust the super intelligent AIs that you're developing? And the same people who just explained to me why they can't trust other humans suddenly say, oh, we think we could trust the super intelligent AIs, which I think is borderline insanity. Because, with humans, we know we have trouble with humans, but we also understand them to some extent. We know quite a lot about human psychology and biology. We have experience in history, not just of violence and war, but also in building trust. 100,000 years ago, humans lived in tiny bands of a few dozen individuals, couldn't trust anybody outside their band. Now we have nations like China with 1.4 billion citizens who cooperate on a daily basis. We have a global trade network connecting even different countries. So we have some achievements in building trust between humans. With AIs, we have no experience. We are just creating them. We already know they can lie and deceive and manipulate. We have no idea what will happen when we release millions of super intelligent AIs to take control of our financial system and military system and culture. So the people who lose trust in other humans, but imagine they can trust an alien super intelligence, this is extremely scary and I think irresponsible.
Things is just like this, because when you are an engineer, you create something, and you will naturally get the confidence to say I can control it. But the things is just like this. When we turn to the AI, it's just a black box. We have no idea what would happen in there, and if there will be certain we call subjectivity within this AI engine, and whether they will have desires, they will have their own intentionality to do certain things, and they have their own value systems, they have their own value preference. All these kind of things were super dangerous. But the things is just like this. When we say that, okay, we just cannot trust other people, means what? Means we know that what is human being, what is human nature. But nowadays, we are still panning for the new definition of what is AI, what is new species. And, this is largely lead us to a very interesting thing about the difference between silicon-based life and carbon-based life. We seem to have a very clear definition of what is carbon-based life. Even despite of the observable phenomena, which we are living or something like that. But the general definition of carbon-based life is that we will dead. We will dead another days. And these things composed the basic element of the human nature. I said this, the necessity of death and the dependence of group, community, and uncertainty, anxiety about future. All those things lead to us fully understanding of human beings. And the mutual trust among people is the most costly things that we have found in history. And these things lead to a very interesting things is like this. Maybe I could say that through intelligence, we can tell us from animal. We know that we are some species with intelligence. But is that case that we can tell us from the AI engine in potential? Because we have emotion. We are deficiency. We have deficiency. We actually have limitations. You know, according to the Chinese philosophy, the most important thing is that we must face up to the real self with emotion, with limitation. We just cannot know everything. And we should be very humble when we face up to others and future. So this is largely Western from the ancient China. And this is largely, you said about responsibility. And responsibility not just come from a social mechanism, but come from what? Self-understanding of what is yourself, what is the essence of human beings.
And I think a very important point about humans is that we often define ourselves by our intelligence to distinguish us from other animals. We want to feel superior to all the animals, and what can give us superiority? Not the body, not physical strength. So we say, we are more intelligent than all the other animals. So we give, I think, far too much emphasis on intellect and intelligence in the understanding of ourselves, which is now becoming extremely dangerous because soon there will be something more intelligent than us on the planet. So if it's all about intelligence, it's game over for humanity. And maybe I share something from my own personal history, which taught me in, again, a very painful way that intelligence is not the most important thing in humanity or in life. When I was quite a young boy, I was spotted in the school as a gifted student. So they took me out of my school in my neighborhood and sent me to a special school for gifted students where they collected these kind of genius kids from all over the northern part of the country. It was quite far away from my neighborhood, so it was a long ride every day, but this was not the bad thing about it. The really awful thing about it is that this was a special school for gifted students, so everybody saw us as some kind of walking intelligence. And we were valued for our intelligence. And here is where it became really problematic. Back in my neighborhood school, I was easily the best in everything, in mathematics, in reading, in writing, in everything, without much effort, which first left a lot of time to play and do other things. And secondly, kind of my position as the smartest kid in the class was easily secured. And this was my identity. I'm the smartest kid in the class. Suddenly, I find myself in a class with 30 other genius kids who also define themselves as being the smartest kid in the class. Now, you throw 30 10-year-old kids into a class like this, and you get a gladiatorial arena. Not with fists, but with words. We were merciless. It was like the cruelest place I've ever seen in my life was this class. Sometimes, I read in history books about wars and terrible things that are happening, so it's worse. But like from personal experience, this was kind of the worst thing that I saw was these 30 10-year-old kids tearing each other to pieces, trying to prove them I'm smarter than you. It was also hell for the teachers because our kind of contest was who could find the mistakes the teachers make and humiliate the teachers. This was like, you're a king of the class for a day if you manage to humiliate and most of the time we just humiliated each other. Like, the teacher asks something and somebody gives an answer and everybody jumps and says, this is not true. And so it went on for years. And the whole rationale of this class was to develop the intellect of these kids. So nobody invested anything in developing our social skills, in developing our emotional skills, or in developing our physical skills, our bodily skills. And it was a very, I now can joke about it, but it was a very painful experience. You know, after being for 10 years in this environment, as teenager, we came out with quite developed intellects, but with horrible social skills, which made, I know some of the people who were in that class, and they still carry deep scars, injuries from that time. And this taught me in the most kind of personal and visceral way that you cannot define a person or build a person based only on intellectual skills. There are much more important things, that ultimately humanity is about feelings and not about thoughts. Maybe if I have more time, I'll say something also about, I said something personal. Now let's kind of open it to the grand vision of human evolution. You know, originally, we humans, our ancestors at least, were worms crawling on the ground or in the mud. A very simple life form. It's just a tube with two openings, a mouth to take in food, and another opening to expel all the waste from the body. There was no brain. There were already nerve cells, neurons, but there was no brain. The center of command of this ancient worm was in the stomach, where the food went. Now, over millions of years, in order to get food and also warn about danger, so more nerve cells developed around the mouth in order to taste the food and smell the food and see the food and hear the food. And this became the brain. And this is still our basic structure today. We are basically a worm. It's just, you know, look at yourself. It's just this long twisting tube with a few things attached to it. But it's a worm, and the brain is still near the mouth. But the big question is, maybe the center of control is still where it always was, in the stomach, not in the brain. And it's a big question in brain science, because maybe not the stomach, but the spinal cord is an integral part of the brain. And there are good reasons to think that, yes, you have all these neurons here that get all the attention, but ultimately the real center of command of the human being is still here.
Well, actually, I know exactly what you're talking about, but Professor Harari, as one of the smartest guys around the world, saying that intelligence is not that important. It's really interesting. Okay, go on, Professor.
Yeah, actually, you know, always there's kind of show off to say that I'm very smart, but it's not so important. But actually, you know, I know that the students here on set of this hall, the university students who have passed a very selective examination to go to this campus. And actually, you during dated back to your childhood, you are the smartest students in your class. But once you step into this campus, even though you are just somehow around average, and this is a very, you know, this is very tough process of mind change, especially in the first year, first semester. You must accept that I'm just around average, and you know, most of your teacher think like you just so you are not so smart. And all the way you adopted to demonstrate that you're smart is totally nonsense. So this is largely the things that lead us to a very important point to say that the things that make us human is about our deficiency. Or the things that is not so concerned with intelligence. Because the things is just, for me, it's just like this. When we say that we are trying to controlling certain things that has intelligence that supports us, we still has a very important reasoning mode that come from instrumental reasoning. We try to regard this as a tool, but not as a subjector. And if you regard this as a tool, then actually you will get into the trap of modernity. The trap of modernity is a continuous pursuit of efficiency. You do things quicker, and you face up to different kinds of competitions. And you have competitions with human beings, other companies, other countries, other nations, all those things. It's about competition. And now we have a new competition. With what? With AI. With new and species that is totally has intelligence that supports us. This is the real things that stir and get all us into a panic. And this kind of worry actually lead to a historical reflections. Because what? The anxiety that long for thousands of years always come from the same things. The uncertainty of future. And how we can take action responsible to respond the change that's happening. So to speak, for me, that is, the things is not just about technology. The things is about the deep understanding of the deficiency of human beings. And we should, with full recognition of our limitation, then to take a cautious steps towards the future. And to say, just as the motive of today's discussion, understanding is an antidote. You must firstly to do certain in-depth reflection before you take any action. But now we are too rush in action, and we too rush into a new form of competition. And this is largely what I called consequence of modernity. So we actually not face up to the so-called competition with AI, but we actually run into a competition with ourselves.
But I'm not sure I would put all the blame just on modernity, because we see things like that also in ancient times. I know very little about Taoism, so I would be happy to hear from you about it. But at least in the West, you can trace these things back thousands of years. Especially you talked about the fear that humans have of losing control, of not knowing. And this fear often propels people to look for something infallible. Like the fantasy of super intelligence didn't begin today or a few decades ago. The fantasy of super intelligence, at least in the West, goes back thousands of years when humans yearned to find some super intelligent savior, Messiah, God, that knows everything, that never makes mistake, and that we can rely on him because we can't rely on ourselves. And this fantasy, the first artifact that it produced, and which is still one of the most important artifacts in the world, is the Holy Book. Again, I don't know what is the status of Taoist texts that you're studying. I'll be very happy to hear in a moment from you. But in religions like Judaism and Christianity, ultimate authority is invested not in any human being, like a priest or a rabbi or something. Ultimate authority is invested in an artifact, a text, which is supposed to be super intelligent, never makes a mistake. Now, of course, until today, there was always one very big problem with texts like the Bible. They can't talk. They can't answer questions. So here I am, believing that this text is perfect intelligence, never makes any mistake, but I have trouble understanding the words. It's not written very well. there are too many meanings to the same sentence. I'm not sure which meaning is the correct one. Or maybe this text was written 3,000 years ago when people were farmers. Now I have like a modern business. I'm not sure how to apply the lessons of this text to the new reality. So what do? I ask the text, it doesn't answer. So I need a human to interpret the text for me. And then a class of humans emerge which are experts in interpreting the text, and they become the real authority in society. These are the rabbis and the priests. Now, something extremely interesting is happening right now in the world, at least of these religions, that suddenly the text can talk, because you can give an AI to read the Bible and all the other religious texts. I mean, over thousands of years, if I take the case of Judaism, rabbis didn't just read the Bible. They wrote thousands and thousands of commentaries on the Bible, and commentaries on the commentaries, and commentaries on the commentaries on the commentaries, which all became sacred. And your position as a rabbi, you're a big rabbi if you know more texts, and you're a little rabbi if you know only a few. No rabbi was able to read and remember all the texts. Impossible for a human. But AI can. For the first time in the history of Judaism, there is something on earth that can read all the texts of Judaism, everything written by every rabbi in Poland or Yemen like 800 years ago. It read everything. It remembers every single word. It can find connections and patterns in the holy texts that no rabbi can. Will it become the new authority in Judaism? Now, if you have a question and the AI says, oh, this is the answer, it can give you like pages and pages of proof from holy books. Now, if a human rabbi says, don't listen to this AI, it's a soulless machine, the problem, at least in Judaism, is that the authority is invested in the text, not in the human. So if an AI finds arguments in the text, the rabbis cannot just dismiss because it's the argument, because the text has authority. Now the word speaks. AI has mastered language. So it's interesting. This is kind of my perspective as a historian on all this. How it's not just modernity, it's the whole of human history which is feeding into this AI revolution with very unexpected consequences, maybe. The same thing is happening in the legal system, which also a very authoritative text that until today we needed lawyers to interpret the text. Now the text can speak for itself. It's the same thing in the financial system. Until today we needed bankers and financiers to interpret the money, the financial texts. Now they can interpret themselves. So maybe AIs take over the financial systems and the religions and the legal system. So this is just kind of a thought to share. And I would be very happy to hear how it is in Taoism, and whether you think that you will have an AI Taoist master anytime soon.
No, actually, the case was totally different in Taoism. Because, I'm just not trying to blame everything to the modernity. But the thing is just like this, modernity comes from the Western tradition. Exactly, the modernity is the offspring of the whole tradition. But in China, it's totally different. Because Taoism is a too complex systematic sort. So let me just start with a very simple sentence, the very opening sentence of the Tao Te Ching, 道可道非常道, which means the things that you spoke out is not the constant things. Which means, for me, there is a very interesting definition of authority. You just mentioned of authority, which is always correct. And for us Chinese people, along with the Taoist intellectual tradition, we actually have the two pre-assumptions. The first thing is, as common human beings, we have very clear limitation of our rationality. We just cannot say we can control or grasp the ultimate truth of the cosmos, of the whole thing. And this is because what? Because we are human beings. And then, is there any authority that we can rely on that seems always correct? Yeah, we have certain kinds of a memory of those things. Sagehood. There is golden age, governed by the sages, and the sages know the exact internal mechanism of the so-called cosmos. But the thing is just like this. Things change for Taoists. Everything changes, everything floating. And you just cannot say there is one set regulations and rules who can run all the way of the history of human beings. So the thing is that you must depend on the original text, but you just cannot just rely on it. You read into it and you get something back, and then you have a try of what you learned from it. And this does not mean you have the always correct regulations and rules that behind you. So to speak, the most important thing is that for Chinese people, especially for Taoists, we must keep open-minded towards the change, towards the ultimate rules of the cosmos, which we could say this: the cosmos is an eternal Sphinx riddle for Chinese people, especially for Taoists. So in this way, can we say that modernity as a product of Western tradition actually have a shortage to say that there is absolute rules, absolute regulations, and absolute or universal mechanism that can dominate everything that in our eyesight. But for Chinese or traditional Chinese thought, there is no such things. The universal correctness, the ultimate truth, there's nothing of it. Because you just look at the cosmos, everything changes. There is a totality of the cosmos, but there is no so-called ultimate and universal things that you can grasp and you can get. And this is why I just mentioned why Chinese people always keep humble to the change. And we always try to do things in a detour of learning and practicing. We're learning something and we put it in practice, and we got reflections, and we back to the text again, and then we take action according to my learning or learning from the text. So this is largely very Chinese style. And this is why I called Chinese style actually very different from the Western counterpart. And this is why we could find certain therapy of the problem of modernity that we can draw from the Oriental sources, Oriental thought. So this is largely why we should do certain expansion of our intellectual views through mutual learning and mutual understanding, I think.
And similarly, in Buddhism, there is also a lot of similar arguments to what you just mentioned from Taoism, that we need to acknowledge the limitations of humanity. There are no absolute truths that you can hold on to. Everything is empty. And you need to rely on practice and not just on some text that says something. And then they memorize these texts again and again and again. And you go to monasteries and you see even monks and that their main practice is memorizing texts. And the authority in the religion becomes the authority of the experts on the texts. And the texts say, don't rely on texts. And this is what the experts on texts will say to you. And, you know, there is a very famous Buddhist story
about a monk who meditated in a forest, and there was a parrot living near where the monk was meditating, and the monk wanted to protect the parrot from danger. So the monk told the parrot, "Parrot, be careful. In this part of the woods, there is a hunter that comes every now and then. The hunter will spread grains on the ground. You'll see the grains, you'll get attracted to the grains. When you go for the grains, he hid a net, and the net he'll spring the net, he will capture you. So parrot, be careful, a hunter will come." And the parrot, the monk kept repeating this warning, "Parrot, be careful, a hunter will come." And the parrot, as a parrot, learned this warning. And the parrot would sit there on the tree and just repeat all day, "Parrot, be careful, a hunter will come. Parrot, be careful, a hunter will come." And one day, a hunter came. And the hunter spread the grains. And the parrot got attracted to the grains and went to eat the grains. And the hunter sprang the trap, and the parrot was captured. And all through that process, and even when the hunter was holding the parrot in the hand, going to kill him, the parrot kept saying, "Parrot, be careful, a hunter will come."
You mentioned a very interesting things is about what? For me, the things is just like this. I think the fundamental part of just you mentioned the gap between theory and practice. It's about what? It's about our basic need as human beings. I think that our fundamental need is the need for order. The order, the understanding of the outside world. And this kind of understanding actually lead us to set up our intellectual man side somehow. But, when you run into a real life, you must somehow compromise with your immediate demand. And this compromise actually be part of your daily life. And you just cannot say, because there is a gap between theory and practice, to say that there is no use for theoretical understanding of the whole things. But what I try to say is that the foundation of order is we are longing for meaning. We must know what we are doing. You just say that we do some things. We must have our intention, and where come this so-called intention? I say we have a systematic understanding of what is meaning, and this meaning actually on the basis of order, the acknowledgement of the order, and this order actually lead to so-called knowledge. This logic lineage actually lead to my very simple conclusion to say this matter of the gap between the theory and the so-called practice. We should still respect the capacity of reflection and the theoretical construction. Because what? Because there is a balance between these two. And you must go back to theoretical reflections to keep you somehow distance from the wrong, misleading actions. So people is human beings so complex. We just cannot say we have one extreme. Though just as I mentioned, for Chinese philosophers, the most important thing is what? Is balance between extremes. But not to say, okay, there is a gap, so we must have a certain kind of solution for it.
But what do we do in the present moment in history when, for thousands of years, philosophers could have debates like this? And it was important to some extent, but it was not all that important because the world went on. Humans created various orders, and the orders collapsed, and they created a new order, and the new order was maintained for some time, and it collapsed. And this is how it went for thousands of years. And at least my fear is that we have reached the end of the road, and that whatever wisdom we have accumulated from thousands of years of philosophy,
and from thousands of years of history, it needs to manifest now or it's too late. That like all the big questions of philosophy are now practical questions. We have, I don't know how many years. Some say 5 years, some say 10 years, some say 15 years before what the experts called AGI, artificial general intelligence. Not this little AI that you have on your smartphones, the DeepSeek or the ChatGPT, but the artificial general intelligence, which will be more intelligent than humans, not in a specific field, but in all fields. And once this happens, the ball is out of our hands. It's like we are having this discussion, and astronomers tell us that they spotted a fleet of spaceships coming from some other solar system. According to the calculations of the astronomers, these aliens will land on the planet in between 5 and 15 years. We don't know much about them. Maybe they're nice. Who knows? Maybe they'll help us solve cancer and overcome climate change, and maybe not. But we have 5 to 15 years to think what we are doing. And this is the time that I think all the wisdom traditions of humanity, again, developed over thousands of years, what do they tell us? What do they tell us about this specific moment in history, which is, I think, different from previous moments, because the process of change, of course, things will continue to change, but maybe not for humanity. Maybe this is kind of the last station for humanity.
Actually, just one word. You can close the whole discussion. Actually, I think that for me, I'm more optimistic than you. For me, that advantage of humanity is just because of its deficiency. You know, just because we are not perfect. And you can imagine certain perfect things, but I do not think that we could just be replaced with the civilization of human beings will be replaced by certain super intelligence. Because what? Because we have emotions. But I just cannot imagine how silicon-based life have imagined, have desire, have intention to just to remove us, to set up a kind of governance on human beings. Because what? Because we have desires, because we are somehow has a very strong sense of shortage, strong sense of deficiency. So this is largely the only things that, in my mind, that might be more optimistic than you.
I'm not sure how much time we have, but I don't know whether AIs or AGIs will ever have consciousness, will ever have feelings. I think this is the biggest question of all, but I don't think that you need feelings in order to have goals and to act in the world as an independent agent. AIs, you give them a goal, or they develop a goal, then they do things to reach the goal without any emotions or desires. If you have a self-driving vehicle, you can give the vehicle the goal, get me as fast as possible to the train station, and the self-driving vehicle on the way would run over people. Because I gave it the goal, get there as fast as possible, and forgot to tell it, but don't kill anybody on the way. So, and similar, we have so many examples. That the most famous example is what happened on social media. That social media companies gave the AIs, the very primitive AIs that run social media, the goal of increasing user engagement, make people spend more time on the platform, and the algorithms began to spread hate and fear online and to destabilize societies all over the world, because they discovered that the easiest way to increase engagement is with fear and hatred and greed. So they don't have any desires, they don't have any emotions, but they can have a goal, and then they can do a lot of things on the way to that goal. And that, I think, is the danger for us. And the fact that we have emotions and feelings means that we can suffer a lot. I mean, I think that ultimately the definition of consciousness is the capacity to suffer and to be liberated from suffering. But this is no protection. You know, cows can suffer, and we didn't treat them very well. Other animals can suffer, and you know, it's not necessarily even that we are evil. A lot of animals we have destroyed without even thinking about it. So the cows, we exploit them for meat and milk and so forth. But so many species have gone extinct in just the last few years by humans destroying their habitats, like they live in some forest, and the humans come and cut the forest and build something. And the humans are not even aware that they are doing something bad to these. There is no evil intention. It's just you don't see them. So some super intelligence may have whatever goal it could be, and it's not evil, it doesn't even have any emotions, it's just on the way to the goal, it runs over us.
Great. I think we are about to run out of time, but I'm sure that Professor Cheng likes to share some comments on. You're fine? Okay. So before we end, let's invite Professor Harari to give a close remark.
For me, it was an honor and a pleasure to be here with you today. And this has been one of the most inspiring discussions I've had recently. So thank you for that. The reason I do these talks and that I wrote the book is because I really think that humanity is about to make maybe the most important decisions in our history. And at present, there are very few people in very few countries that understand what is happening and that take part in the conversation. Lots of people now have heard about AI, but most people don't have a deep enough understanding of the AI revolution to know what is at stake and to feel competent to take part in the discussion. So I can't tell people what would be the solutions or what policies to adopt. My understanding is also very limited. My goal is to give many more people in many more countries a basic understanding of what is the AI revolution, what is at stake, so that millions of people in numerous countries will feel motivated and competent to join the conversation, so that we can hear more opinions, more interests, more worldviews, and thereby hopefully reach a better decision. At present, the people who really understand and take the decisions, they are not even elected representatives of anybody. They are mostly these leaders of the big AI companies. And this is dangerous for humanity. So that's my motivation, and I hope that you will feel motivated and competent to take part in the conversation, because it's the conversation about your future also, about everybody's future. My other remark is that I noticed that there are several people here that read my books, that maybe are my fans, and I know from previous, I have historical knowledge, so I know what happens at the end of the event, that lots of people come and they want to sign books and take selfies and so forth, and unfortunately I don't have the time to do it because I have to rush to another event. So I would leave you with something better than my signature and better than my picture, which is really parts of me, it's my atoms. Just as a final thought for reflection and about the interconnectedness of everything, we have sat you together in this beautiful hall for an hour and a half, breathing all the time, and the air mixes our breath together. So a lot of the atoms that were inside my body an hour and a half ago are now in your body. And a lot of the atoms that an hour and a half ago were in your body are now in my body. So in this way, we have shared something even more important than a signature or a picture. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I would assume that us having more information and more access to information would lead to more truth, less conspiracy, more agreement, but that doesn't seem to be the case.
No, not at all. Most information in the world is junk. It's like with food. There was a time, like a century ago in many countries, where food was scarce. So people ate whatever they could get, especially it was full of fat and sugar. And they thought that more food is always good. Like if you ask your great-grandmother, she would tell you, yes, more food is always good. And then we reach a time of abundance. And we have all this industrialized processed food, which is artificially full of fat and sugar and salt and whatever. And it's obviously bad for us. The idea that more food is always good, no. And definitely not all this junk food. And the same thing has happened with information. Philosophers like Charles Taylor and psychologists and others, they looked into this kind of mental atom of the self and realized, like the physical atom, it's not solid at all. It contains not just multitude of subparticles, but they are constantly moving and interacting and changing.
Did it help you understand something about yourself?
Yes, that and what I define as myself itself needs a lot more exploration. You think you know yourself, but you don't. Not just, the kind of individual events of your life. Your very understanding of what is a self is far from self-evident. And it is itself the product of a lot of stories and mythologies which are not necessarily true.